Noah's Ark 2x2 formation. Road change now, we go racing for the first time this season. 3 hours of GT action, it's go.
This is very tight as they come down. Group of cars coming in, this has all got trouble written all over it. This is G3 cars.
Drop downhill there, head towards the Aqua Minerale. Imola, of course. There's another one off through the gravel. As wide as possible as they drop downhill, putting that truck inside line. Yes, he did. Through he goes.
Good evening everybody and welcome back to another Apex Online Racing stream here for round 7 of the Tier 2 Sprint Series at Zolder once again, and we've just switched over to qualifying, but joining me in the commentary box again tonight, hopefully at least for the time being, we may have some technical difficulties as a bit of a warning, but joining me again, Tim, how are you doing, my good friend? Something tells me that we may already be experiencing those technical difficulties, so hopefully Tim will be able to join momentarily, and hopefully we'll be able to get him involved in the comms. But yep, for the time being we've gone into the qualifying session. Let's hop on board with some of these guys. And we saw some interesting stuff yesterday in Tier 1 around here, not just in qualifying, but in the race as well, despite maybe Zolder not being a track to stereotypically provide the greatest of on-track action. We definitely had our fair share of incidents and close racing. And tonight for Tier 2, got an interesting sort of setup on our hands for how tonight may end up affecting the championship battle. Because if we look a little bit at the standings, after last week with that amazing victory from Marco Yonkers with that brilliant pit strategy around Spa in those changing tricky conditions, no such worries tonight. We've got completely dry race these guys tonight. Took a brilliant victory there, and our two championship competitors of Tommy Razier and Grantas Correcas took the other two podium spots, with Tommy Razier being able to extend his championship lead by a small amount. So there's only a 16-point gap between these two guys, and with 2 races left on the calendar, you know, today's race could really affect the way that this championship battle may end up being wrapped up as we head towards Silverstone. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out for these guys. And looking at Correcas at the moment, he'll be looking to set a good initial lap. And someone else to also keep an eye on, I think, for this round is that Bentley of Leonard McCoffkin. Now, I don't know whether or not he has any penalties that will be transferring over from last week. There was some mixed action and incidents he was involved in. I'm not sure whether or not anything got investigated after the race, but the Bentley extremely quick around there, and as he immediately puts himself on provisional pole, what will it be for Korekis as he crosses the line? 27.6, so he's about 10th and a half off for the time being, and then his championship rival, Tommy Rozier, slots into P3 for the time being on 27.7, but that Bentley of Makovkin is looking mightily fast today around this circuit. It's just a car that you're able to be so aggressive with the curves. We saw, I think it was Shomatinsky in the Bentley that went really far from the back of the grid and ended up finishing, I believe, around the top 5 in the end after just a brilliant charge through the field. And I think by the looks of it, I've got a feeling that we have unfortunately lost him for this evening.
But only in voice. I'm afraid for some reason my internet has gone so badly I can't get in the lobby anymore, so apologies. Obviously there's meant to be a two-man team, but it is the man, the legend John, who is going to be saving the day. Yeah, for some reason only getting 8 megabytes down, so can't get in the lobby and have a Discord call going at the same time. So I think I am going to have to retire this one as I keep getting disconnected even from Discord. So apologies. Hope you enjoy the race, guys. Obviously, John, he is the man. He knows what he's doing. He's an absolute legend. Please go absolutely crazy for him in the YouTube chat, because I can't even get the YouTube chat open to say good luck. But best of luck, mate. And yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to sit this one out last minute.
Absolutely gutted, mate. I am sorry. Hopefully all will be well for the final round next week. Hopefully everything will be sorted and we can wrap up the season on a high. But thank you for trying. It's been behind the scenes leading to this race. We have been quite determinedly trying to sort things out, but alas, obviously not meant to be this week. But yeah, hopefully see you again in the comms box for the next one, mate.
Thank you very much, buddy. Say best of luck to all our racers, all our viewers, and of course yourself.
Cheers, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Well, unfortunately then, not only will you be stuck with me for the second night in a row, that you're stuck with me on my own for this evening, but I shall do my best to bring you some good coverage of the race tonight. But so far, as it looks like in qualifying, Makovkin continuing to show strong pace. Rozier improving up to P2 for the meantime. On that last lap, though, Makovkin invalidated a 27.1, which is a very fast time. What's it going to be on this one? He's invalidated again. He's got really strong pace in this Bentley. Those lap times are seriously around, well within the top 10. I think maybe even challenging towards kind of the lower end of the top 5 for Tier 1. So that's some pace in that Bentley, but Korekis, he has just done a 27.3. Oh, he runs a little bit wide. They're going through turn 1 now, have to back out of that lap. Hopefully shouldn't cause too much of an issue for Oliar's behind, but let's have a look at this Bentley. How does this Bentley go through these curves? Oh, it's a huge jump through there. So much aggression there from Makovkin, just able to eat that, but I think he did actually invalidate there, so a little bit too aggressive. But Makovkin definitely has the ability to be very fast around here. But as we saw last night, drive-through penalties, track warnings, and just trying to keep it clean around here. It's such a technical, difficult circuit to push hard at. It's going to be a real stretch of these guys' concentration, especially as we then get into the kind of evening stage of this race, and it being a 90-minute race as well. It really does put a lot of strain on these drivers to try to be fast and consistent during the entire race period. As Korekis maybe looking to try to get a bit of clean air, that's one way to do it, and cutting that chicane that gives a lot of people trouble in the race. It's just such an awkward series of twists and turns to try to nail consistently during the race, because you really do have to cut to the inside from each apex, and track limits a little bit unsure, I think, for the drivers around here, to say the least. One of those very punishing tracks where you can seemingly take quite a ludicrous amount of curb and apex on one lap, but then the game will punish you for what seems like a lesser crime on the next. So it is definitely a challenge. But let's see what Korekis can do. He is going to be going for another flyer now, currently sitting on a 27.3. And I'm surprised at how competitive the McLarens are around here. And you know, looking at the grid that we've got at the moment, we've got one Bentley in the top 6 with 5 other McLarens. And then we've got the Bentleys of Matt York and Dylan Gosling, so good performances from them if they can keep that into the top 10. And those Bentleys might be very fast in the race. Korekis now, see how much aggression he takes through the chicane. The car really jumping. We saw some very extreme kangaroo-like approaches to that chicane yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys in Tier 2 deal with this. But Korekis, I don't think he's on an improvement at the moment, but Makovkin does look like he has found a 10th in just the opening sector, the opening couple of corners, excuse me, alone as he heads through turn 4 using all of that runoff. And I really think if Makovkin can pull this lap together, he's got just under 6 minutes to do it, that this could be a mighty quick qualifying session from him. How does he go through the chicane? A bit more caution through there. That was reserved, and he has lost time. He loses almost 2/10. You can see that just how quickly that you can lose time from that chicane by just having to be a bit more reserved. Or he might have invalidated that through there. That did look like that was quite aggressive throughout a series of apexes. Remember, the Bentley, one of the only cars on the grid to be right-hand drive, potentially even the only car on the grid to be right-hand drive, and it does have its advantages and disadvantages depending on what circuits we end up going to on the calendar. So that's also a factor to play into this. It tends to mean that for that chicane, that you're a little bit less sure about where your entry is. You can be a bit more confident about where you're placing the car on the exit, but by that point, you're kind of a bit of a passenger through that chicane, and that is really determined over that first apex. So we'll have to see how he is able to make use of that during the race, as he's gone wide at turn 1. Oh, got to get out of the way of the Lexus. I think that was Terminen. Hopefully didn't hold him up too much. Seeing some support from Andrex, a long-standing name in the AOR community, cheering on Yorkie and Shooter. Yorkie having a good showing so far, currently sitting in P7 in that Bentley, and Shooter 80 not having the strongest of performances for the time being, but hopefully if he is able to... That was a huge amount of curb there from Makovkin. Obviously he's backed out of this lap because of going wide, but maybe just practicing his line through there. These guys are really seeming to improve at the moment, but yep, Shooter 80, you know, this race, if he's able to just be clean and consistent, he might be able to make up positions just by the sort of errors that some of these other guys end up running into. So it's definitely not all said and done just yet. They're going to look towards Terminen for now. He's one of the only drivers that's on an improvement, although I think he had a bit of a wonky line potentially through that hairpin. He was up by 4/10 at one point, now barely up a 10th. We get a good run through at final chicane. Brute of a Lexus as he tries to get it through there, and as he gets the run towards the line. Oh, just a few thousandths away from his previous best, but he won't be able to improve. And looking at our grid at the moment, surprisingly, we've got the likes of Connor Wright sitting all the way down in 13th position, and you know, he came so close to winning at Donington. He had that redemption at the Hungaroring, but you know, we know the BMW has pretty strong pace here from Tier 1 last night, but not seeming like he's managing to get into the groove with the car at the moment. And Marlon only managing to get a couple of positions ahead of him in that Ferrari. That looked good there from Makovkin. I think it still was a little bit on the cautious side, but he is on an improvement. He doesn't need a huge amount to potentially take pole. I'll tell you what, they'll also have to keep an eye on Yonkers as well. Where is he on the circuit? So he is actually coming down towards the hairpin, so we'll see how he finishes this lap. Our race winner from last week in that number 3 McLaren. He has lost a little bit of time. I think Makovkin's lost some time as well. Razier has found some in the opening sector. And I think Yonkers there backing out of that one. He's going to look to set up another lap. don't think Makofkin's going to particularly improve on this one. Got Meerveld on an improvement as well. And I think where is he on the circuit? So he's just come through the exit of the hairpin now as well, heading towards that tricky chicane of the final part of this circuit. And a wave there from Trevor Wenham, our race leader for so long yesterday in that opening period of the Tier 1 race. Getting a solid podium result though in the end, so it was still a strong showing from him, so hello to you as well. Good to see you supporting the Tier 2 stream as well. It's lovely to see some support across the board for AOR. Meerveld currently sitting in P14, doesn't look like he's going to be able to do too much. A surprising improvement though from Marlon on that last lap, only a couple of hundredths away from Leonard Makofkin. And he's managed to get himself up now to P4 because Tommy Razier has improved. He was only 12 thousandths off Karekas, so our two championship rivals, and Razier's pitting, so that's going to be him out of the being able to improve. I think Karekas is finishing off a formation lap. That looks like Meerveld got caught up through that other sector, but looking towards Makofkin once more. It says he's 3/10 up at the moment. How does he fare through this final chicane? That looks smart. This could be a really good lap from him. It might be enough to take pole position and disrupt the championship, and it will be. He goes the fastest on a 27.190, and that's going to be really difficult to beat for Karekas, I think. He will also have one more attempt himself to see if he can put a good lap together. Also got the likes of Oliars on a solid improvement as well, but I thought that Bentley might be faster around here, and it is definitely giving Makofkin the sort of package that he needs to really extract some good performance. We've seen good pace from him at various points in the season, but he just hasn't quite been able to put it together. But maybe this is his chance, and he's also improving once more. Already found a 10th in the first sector. I imagine we might see quite the big jump at the chicane for him. What's it going to be for Oliars as he heads towards the line? He improves to P6. Yonkers coming into the final sector. In the meantime, keeping an eye on the likes of Makofkin. He is still improving. He's heading down towards the hairpin, so if it is a valid lap from him, he is still 2/10 up for the time being. Yonkers now coming into these last couple of corners. Go through so much effort trying to put together a strong lap around here, but it's so easy to misjudge that braking zone. We saw the likes of Niels, our race winner from last night, misjudging that braking zone, and as Yonkers comes across the line, he goes up into P2. So a brilliant lap time from him, but what's it going to be from Makofkin? This could be huge, and a 27.002, almost into the 26s, and that is a brilliant lap from him. Fantastic effort there. So close to making it into the 26s, and if I remember rightly, it was a 26 point. It was a high 26.9 from Trevor last night to take pole position around here. So a 27 almost on the dot. That's only 2 thousandths behind the likes of Niels Narks from yesterday, and he took a dominant victory around here. So absolutely making the mark there for Makofkin, and his previous effort would have been good enough for pole there as well. So a brilliant qualifying session from him, and that sets us up for a very, very interesting race indeed. So we'll have a quick run through of the grid. As I flick through all of my panels again, apologies if there are slight changeover delays. This is all on a single monitor once more, so it does make certain things a bit difficult. But looking at our grid, Leonard Makofkin then, brilliant result for him. Oh, but immediately struck down by a 45-second penalty. I wondered if there would be penalties carrying over for him around here, but it might not be all over and done with just yet, because 45 seconds, that is definitely a huge penalty. There's no doubt about it. But he does have extremely good pace, and if he is able to make a breakaway in these opening laps, and we saw that with the battling that just took place kind of around for 4th place yesterday, that there ended up being a huge gap between the likes of Jardier and George Boothby and Trevor Wenham in just kind of the opening sort of series of the first stint. So it might not be all said and done for Mikotkina. It's going to be difficult to maybe try to convert this pole position into a win, but I think with a 90-minute race, if he's clean, if he's consistent, if he keeps a cool head, he could definitely still do something. And we saw that the overcut strategy is actually fairly viable around here because the undercut isn't very strong. So if he's able to pull away, maybe just stay out in clean air for as long as he possibly dares, so that he's just able to take that penalty as late as possible, he may end up not suffering too badly, so we'll have to see how that plays out for him. But Marco Jonker's last week's race winner, starting in P2 to complete that first row, followed by the man in P2 in the championship, Grantas Korekas, ahead of his championship rival of Tommy Razir in P4. So it's going to be a very interesting battle to keep an eye on between those two today, and see how that puts those guys in standing for Silverstone. And Marlon queuing up for P5 in the Ferrari. Good effort there from him in that Van Wall Sim Sport car. Ferrari not typically a car that's too strong around here. It's just so tricky over the curbs. It's just a car that really does not like to be disturbed too much over those curves, and also not the best at quick changes of direction. Can be a bit snappy on traction as well with the sort of torque curve that we have from the Ferrari. So even with some TC adjustments, it can be a tricky car at times, but a good starting point for him. Olyar starting in P6, and Dylan Goslin, I think by far his best qualifying result, starting firmly within the top 10, so a brilliant effort from him in the Bentley. Could be one to watch during the race. We saw how strong Shermatinsky was in the race yesterday, coming all the way from down at very much the low end of the grid to really be challenging around the top 5. So definitely could be seeing Goslin try to take advantage of that Bentley pace. Connor Wright did manage to bump his way up the order a bit before the end of that session. He'll be starting in P8. Zorak, P9. I don't believe we saw him last week at Spa, but we have seen him in the past at Donington do some brilliant defending, so we know that he is capable of some fantastic racecraft in these races. We've got a Struch starting in P10, followed by Matt York. He might be a little bit disappointed with that qualifying position. We know how quick the Bentley can be, and he'll be looking just to try to have a clean start in that mid-pack and hopefully be able to keep himself alive long enough to execute that long-running pace. We saw him have strong pace at Brands Hatch, so it's definitely not over for him just yet whatsoever. Ben Keys starting in P12, followed by Yuko Terminen. And then I've got Totev here on my leaderboard, who should be starting in P14, but I think he may have already disconnected from the server, which is very disappointing for him. I think that's not the first time that that's happened to Totev, so that is very unfortunate. So we are going to be down already, by the looks of it, a driver for the start, so that's very disappointing for him and us. Meerveld starting in what will be P14 then, with a 30-second penalty. So that's going to be something carried over from last week, so disappointing for him to start his race like that. Maybe he'll do quite a daring strategy, pick quite early, try to get out the traffic, take that penalty and see what he can do in clean air, but does have to be careful to not get lapped, because we did see some of those early pitters, the likes of Lateo, with all the antics that he had last night in Tier 1, that he ended up being a lap down and wasn't really able to execute the pace that he had in that car. So tricky one to try to do around here. Not the longest lap for that sort of thing. Benjamin King starting in P15, followed by Jan Kleins. I don't think we've seen Jan for a couple of races now, so it's good to see him back as well. Yazboski starting in P17, and then we have Alex in the BMW. I'm not sure if that's different from Alex Torregrossa, who was also in the BMW. Torregrossa was in a bright pink BMW before, so I don't know if that is the same driver or if that was someone different. And then Shooter 80 rounding up the order with that rather sort of not so much seen car anymore, even less so seen than we were used to in the past. The BMW M6 obviously replaced with the M4 in recent updates, but he is going to see what he can do in that BMW as these guys start to come around to complete their formation lap. And yep, Trevor, it's going to be another 90 minutes of commentary from me tonight. Certainly not the worst way to spend my evening by any means, and I've done a 9-hour stream before from start to finish, so a couple of 90-minute sessions almost feels like a breeze by comparison, but I'm sure we are going to have some exciting action. And yes, we've seen the rather detrimental 45-second penalty that Makovkin is going to be suffering with in this race, but this start is going to be oh so crucial for him. If he has any chance of converting this brilliant qualifying session, what looks to be really strong pace, he really needs to nail this start. So these guys approaching the line now, waiting for the lights to go green. And they are off there, and I think that was a good start from Yonkers. Maybe not good enough to challenge the Bentley there. Makovkin looks like he's going to hold that into turn 1, and he does. Looks like it's been a fairly clean start behind. We've got Tommy Razier looking for an opportunity around the outside of Korekas. Got to be careful not to leave an opportunity there for Marlon behind. Marlon still hunting the back of that McLaren, and Tommy Razier definitely doesn't want to lose too many positions. We've got Goslin and Connor Wright going side by side, with Zorax trying to sneak through as they head through turn 4. Goslin trying to hold on to the outside of that. We've got Meerveld making a move around, I think that's Jarzbowski, and Zorax cutting across to the inside as they head towards the chicane. Got to be very careful about moving in the braking zones. We've seen that cause issues before as these guys all get stacked up through the chicane. I think everyone made it through there cleanly. We've got the likes of Jan Climbs and Terminen battling here in the background. Side-by-side action again, heading towards this turn 7 complex. We've got the Ferrari ahead. I think that's Ben Keys and Climbs cutting through that second apex of the corner there. As Jan Climbs and Terminen still battling, but Terminen will get that position. And Jan Climbs coming under pressure now from, we'll just refer to him as Alex for the time being, trying to go down the inside of the hairpin. Can he get that one done? It's going to be good acceleration from the Porsche on the exit, but can the BMW out-drag? That car looks like he will be able to. Not great straight line speed at all from that Porsche. Looking back towards the front though, it looks all fairly clean from everybody there, and it looks like for the most part we haven't had too much shuffling of position. I think someone though that had a really good opening lap was Connor Wright, finding himself in P7. I think he's gained a position. I think potentially Dylan Goslin was someone that lost out a lot. We've got Matt York with a very nice looking paint job on that Bentley, coming under a bit of pressure from the fast starting Meerveld, but with that 30-second penalty, York won't be too worried about that. He'll be trying to keep his eyes firmly locked onto the gearbox of his rival Bentley up ahead and see if he can close on to the likes of some of those guys ahead of him. These guys start jumping through the chicane. It's going to be so difficult, as we saw last night, for these guys to be consistent during this race and not get too many track warnings. It's so easy to do in this complex of corners. It's so tricky as well. Zolder's so technical, but these guys in Tier 2 doing a brilliant job so far to keep it clean, as Makovkin does already look like he's starting to put some of that Bentley pace to work. You can see he's got a good few car lengths already ahead of Yonkers. With that blue McLaren already starting to fade into a few pixels in the distance, and this is what Makovkin needs to do. If he has any chance of getting a good result out of this race, he needs to be consistent, he needs to be extremely quick, and as he crosses the line, he's immediately gone fastest by 0.7 of a second. So Makovkin, an absolute man on a mission right now. And also should be noted that on that last lap, Yonkers did invalidate that lap. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean he got a track warning for it, but it can potentially be a sign of it, as we look back now to Marlon coming under a bit of pressure from Oliars. The McLaren surprisingly strong around here, despite suffering in similar ways to the Ferrari with how they tackle the curbs. The McLarens just seem to be able to make up that time at other parts of the circuit. Marlon taking a huge amount of curb there and did gain a lot of time there over Oliars. So Marlon definitely not showing too much caution at the moment, and looking to try to open up that gap ahead of Oliar, see if he can start to close up towards Tommy Razier. But as far as championships positions go, it's still very much the same as it was at the start of this race. And with Karekas just one position ahead of Razir championship-wise, that does provide some opportunity for Karekas to close up that gap, so we could potentially have a very exciting finale. But it looks like Shooter 80 has made up a position on Benjamin King. I've got a feeling that King may have made a mistake somewhere during the course of that lap, as he's already firmly locked onto the back of that bright yellow BMW. So he might be trying to give Shooter a bit of trouble for that position in just a moment. His last lap, he comes across the line. It wasn't actually that bad, so he might have dropped to the back of the grid on that lap 1 then instead. But checking in again at the front, Karekas looks like he's been able to reel in Marco Yonkers a little bit, and that's a concern for Tommy Razir. He doesn't want to see Karekas gaining on the cars in front. He wants to see Karekas being, well, effectively in his rear view mirrors, ideally. Karekas, though, showing a lot of caution through that chicane, so he is acutely awake. You can see how much the gap changed just by going through that chicane. Identical cars, obviously, between him and Yonkers, but Karekas very much trying to play the long game at the moment and making sure that he doesn't jeopardize his chances of taking the championship fight to the final race. So definitely good pace in that car, but not really able to exercise too much of it in the meantime when you're approaching a circuit like this where you have to have so much aggression, and just using a bit of caution for the time being. These guys making their way through the final sector. So we've got some close action between Alex and Yang Klein. I think that might have been Alex making his way up through the order and getting past another car. So BMW showing good pace at the moment. And like I say, we saw that as we got further into the stint yesterday, the BMW just got stronger and stronger relative to the cars around it. Also, I think we've got Zorax and Connor Wright and Dylan Goslin in a bit of a three-way tussle for P7 now. Zorax, he might have to start getting his elbows out a bit like he did at Donington Park. He's got that BMW of Connor Wright very, very close to him, and Goslin looking competitive. He dropped a few positions, remember, in the early stages of this race, but he's still very much firmly within the top 10, so he hasn't lost a chance of getting a good result through here. You can see how fiddly it is through there for Connor Wright, and it gets so difficult when you're following a car this closely. This is why a lot of these guys tend to lose so much time, especially through the two chicanes, so the two sort of really complex chicanes. Zorax goes a little bit wide there at the hairpin. He will be okay for now. McLaren has good straight line speed and acceleration, so should have the legs on the BMW, and we saw that happening yesterday with some of the BMWs just not able to set up a move. Gregor Schill put the likes of Jade under pressure several times over, but just doesn't have the acceleration or the top speed to be able to challenge some of these other cars. And the Porsche very strong in acceleration, the McLaren better at the kind of the sort of mid stage of the straights and the top end as they get towards the braking zone. So it makes it very difficult sometimes to set up a move against these guys, especially when there isn't much of an opportunity for slipstream around this sort of circuit. And Zorax has been able to extend that gap by a small amount now, and if anything, Goslin is the one that is looking like he might be putting some pressure onto Connor Wright in just a second. So how do they fare through the chicane once more? Oh, that's a huge amount of curve there for Connor Wright. It was pretty even between all three of them through there, but it does look like Dylan is just closing in a little bit. Oh, he's missed his braking zone, comes to the inside of the corner, and that was good evasive action there from Dylan Goslin. He missed his braking zone completely there, and braking point, excuse me, and now he's going to be under pressure from the likes of Matt York, his other fellow Bentley on this grid. But that was good awareness from Dylan as well as Connor Wright. You saw Connor Wright opening up the steering through that corner, so obviously not what either of these guys wanted to happen through there, because they both ended up losing time as a result. But good spatial awareness and driving from these guys in Tier 2, making sure that we have no contact in these early stages. And I desperately hope that is not a commentator's curse for the coming laps. We've got Yonkers under some pressure again from Korekis, and his gap going a bit back and forth, but you have to say that Korekis has definitely managed to put quite the gap now to Razier. Razier really not able to quite keep with these guys, and the likes of Marlon and Marcin really lost a lot of time on that last lap, as we see that McLaren getting thrown over those curbs once more, and Korekis sniffing around the rear of that car. Oh, we've got a yellow flag. Someone, that's a 742 car. Who is that? That's Marlon. Marlon has gone off, and I think that will be someone suffering through a chicane. We're going to hop back on the replay. It looked like he was suffering around this circuit, and I think the chicane has claimed another victim. We saw it happen to the likes of Malinowski yesterday as he comes through the chicane. A huge jump, and the Ferrari, just as it lands, just nothing that he could do there. And a really awkward place to try to rejoin that car as he ends up pointing very close towards the barrier. So extremely disappointing for him. But we'll look back towards the front end, and amongst all of that, Razier has closed right up onto the back of Korekis, and they're going side by side. This is the battle for the championship. Obviously, one more round to go, but these points are so critical potentially for both of them as they head towards the final round. And not sure what happened to Korekis there. Some point during the last lap, he lost a huge amount of time. He lost well over a second to Razier. So a mistake there from Korekis as Razier runs a little bit wide. Got to be careful not to make too many mistakes. It's so easily done around this circuit. As they head through, there's a huge amount of curb there for Korekis, and he actually extends his margin over Razier a little bit for the time being. So tricky stuff for all of these guys, as Matt York has dropped back a little bit from Dylan Gosselin. So Dylan has got some good pace in that Bentley, and now, if anything, Matt York is the one under pressure from Vince van Meerveld. Quite a big following and fan base in the chat usually for Meerveld, and he is obviously a little bit of a disadvantage with that penalty, but in terms of where he is on track, a little bit more around where we would expect him. I'm going to be looking, though, slightly further up, because Goslin is close to the back of Connor Wright. We've also got Zorax and Oliars, and I think Zorax might have gained quite a bit of time on this last lap. I don't think he was that close before, so on those last laps, yeah, he gained 0.4 of a second. So Zorax, certainly the man on the charge at the moment. Korekis, oh, we see Zorax try to have a look down the outside. Very difficult to make a move around there, and Oliars takes a bait, but that has compromised his exit. He's going to think about going defensive again towards turn 4. A little bit of a late dive potentially from Zorax there. He backs out of it, and that's compromised his run towards the chicane. So he'll be okay for now, or well, Oliars will be alright for now for that pressure. Connor Wright, though, having to still withstand pressure from the Bentley of Dylan Goslin. Gets a good run, though, through that chicane, so he'll be able to maintain that position for now, as will Matt York just a bit further ahead. We've got a few of these guys being pretty close on circuit. We've got Struch and Ben Keys close together. We've also got Marlon trying to recover after that incident through the chicane, thankfully getting no damage other than to his pride, I'd imagine. Such a disappointing thing to happen so early on in this race, and Marlon has had some bad luck at various stages in the season, so he'll be looking to try to recover a good result from this if he can, but not able to do anything just yet. Looking towards a bit further up. Oh, that's Dylan Goslin. Dylan Goslin's dropped back, so we keep on unfortunately missing some of these moments, but Dylan Goslin has to think about turn 1. Got to be so careful to try and make that one corner. Meerveld does leave him space on the apex. That was a bit of a late lunge from Dylan, maybe a bit out of frustration there from the Bentley, but seemingly a mistake potentially from him on that previous lap, and that is going to see him drop a couple of positions So obviously not what he wanted to do, but it does look like some of these gaps have settled down a bit with though. We've got Jan Climbs and Alex battling towards the chicane. We're going to have another side-by-side moment. I don't think so. The Porsche just doesn't have the straight line speed to set up that sort of move. Or maybe a little bit late there from Alex as he went through that chicane. I think he compromised his exit a bit, but I don't think Jan Climbs is going to be close enough on the run unless it's a really late move. Firmly on the gearbox, got to be so close not to run into the back of the BMW, but he's still locked on to the rear diffuser. He's got to be careful as well. Looks like Alex has a little bit of a laggy connection at the moment, so Jan will be aware of that. He's got to be careful not to make any contact. You can see a bit deep there from the BMW. Bit of a slipstream here towards the final chicane. We don't see many moves into the final chicane, but we might see a bit of a late lunge here from Jan Climbs. Can he get it done under braking? No. Tries to set up an exit potentially from here. Use that Porsche acceleration and traction out of the final turn. Anything that he can do. You can see he just doesn't gain anything on this straight. Absolutely locked in to the slipstream. And this is the problem with the Porsche. You can have so much speed and so much talent in this car, but sometimes it's not enough as they head towards turn 2. Oh, as he goes right around the outside. That's an amazing move from Jan Climbs, and he makes it stick. Brilliant stuff from the Porsche there. Wow, that was absolutely fantastic. I really did not think he was going to be able to pull that one off. But brilliant, brilliant opportunistic move there from him in the Porsche. Really making... Oh, Dylan Gosling! Dylan Gosling has a moment on the exit of the chicane. Manages to hold on to it, but he'll be under pressure now from the likes of Astruch as they head towards turn 7. And Astruch thinks about going up the inside, can't do anything. Actually compromises his line there a bit. Have to back off if he doesn't want to get any warnings from there. But what a brilliant, brilliant overtake there from Jan Climbs. It may be further down the order, but by no means does that make it any less extraordinary. Really, really opportunistic stuff there from him, and making use of the different characteristics of these GT3 cars. The Porsche is exceptional in slow speed corners, heavy braking zones, acceleration, and you could see him just trying to set up that move for so long through sequence of corners, and he finally managed to find a gap that I don't think any of us were expecting. Still pretty settled at the front, and Leonard Makovkin still lapping faster than the rest of the field, so he is extending that gap. Maybe not as much as he would be liking if he wanted to aim for a race win, but certainly doing what he needs to do for the time being if he wants to still get a good result here. As we've got Olyars and Zorax again battling quite hard. Zorax, how does he fare through the chicane? Who gets the better run? Pretty even again. So difficult for Zorax to try to follow with commitment through there, and especially the cars that get a lot more upset through that series of corners. It can be so tricky not to just clip those curves a bit too hard, completely bottom out the floor on something that sits as low as the McLaren. As Niels was saying in the interview room yesterday, the McLaren is such a stiff car, and even when you set it to have a really soft suspension, it's still sometimes not quite enough. And Zorax now actually coming under a bit of pressure from the likes of Connor Wright. Just having a quick look at Terminal, he's putting some pressure on to Ben Keys as well, but can't do anything for the meantime, so we'll carry on looking at this trio of cars. Can Connor get anything together with these next few laps to try to get a bit more of a consistent effort? And he's doing what he needs to do if he wants to put pressure onto these guys. He took 0.6 of a second out of Zorax and an entire second there from Olyars. So you see, it's so difficult for some of these guys. It does look like that this BMW is maybe starting to come into its own a bit again. We saw this kind of back and forth with the McLarens and the BMW last night in Tier 1. It's a little bit wider, that'll lose him a small amount of time, but as this stint progresses, we might see Connor Wright be more and more competitive and looking to try to snatch that P5 position that Olyars at the moment is holding on to. Looking back towards the front though for the time being, Karekes again has closed up that gap to Yonkers. He was 0.4 of a second faster than Yonkers on that last lap. Still well over a quarter of a second away from Makovkin, so you can see the sort of pace that Makovkin has got out front there, but Yonkers is under a huge amount of pressure. Moment, Korekis goes down the inside. Very, very late lunge from him. Yonkers is going to try to defend that. Korekis trying to carry the momentum around the outside. Tommy Razier will be hoping this battle carries on and brings him potentially into it. Korekis now having to slot into the slipstream of the blue McLaren ahead of him as he launches an attack down the inside for turn 1. Yonkers carrying the momentum around the outside. Can he hold on to that? It looks like he's going to be able to. Razier coming into this battle now as they're going door to door. Another side-by-side maneuver through turn 2, and Korekis is still there, and here comes Razier. A better exit speed. Is he going to be able to snatch away P3 from Korekis? Oh, Korekis going wide there as they head towards turn 4. They got very, very dicey there between those two, and now 3 McLarens within the smallest of margins. Yonkers, poor run from him. Korekis might try to go around the outside, and so might Razier. Almost 3 wide as they head towards the chicane. This gets tricky, and Korekis makes it work. Where's Yonkers or where's Razier? Razier not able to make that one happen, and he did manage to close up the gap, but his championship rival has made his way through after setting up a move that really did not look like it was on initially. Korekis came out of nowhere almost in that final chicane and then just managed to compromise Yonkers continuously and eventually make that move happen. So brilliant, brilliant racing there from Korekis. That's what we know him to be able to do. As Yonkers there makes a mistake, could come under pressure now from Razier, and Razier will want to try to dispatch of the McLaren ahead of him as quickly as possible. He does not want there to be anything between him and Korekis, and ideally he wants to try charging on and taking that P2 spot away from his championship rival. But it does look like out of these 3 guys that Korekis is the one that's got the strongest pace for the time being. We're going to jump back though for the meantime, have a look at Gosselin versus Meerveld. Gosselin has managed to sort of bring himself a bit closer towards that McLaren. Hasn't been able to do anything for the time being. Obviously a frustrating kind of opening stint as Meerveld makes a bit of a mistake there through turn 1. Doesn't seem to give too much of an opportunity though to Gosselin. Makes a little bit of a mistake there again and loses quite a bit of momentum there on the run all the way towards turn 4. And Gosselin gaining a good few tenths in this opening series of corners in the sector. How do they fare as they get to the chicane? This is typically where we would see the Bentley gain quite a chunk. Meerveld goes very, very deep there. What was the exit like from Gosselin? Gosselin, where is he? Gosselin's gone off again. Gosselin attacking too hard now. Struge! And Struge has a huge moment over the hill. I think he might have actually even tagged the wall. So Struge trying to cut towards the inside, loses it over the crest. And now he has possibly got some damage. I'm not sure if he held on to that one or not, but he is under pressure from Ben Keys, and Matt York's not too far behind as well. So what goes from an opportunity suddenly becomes a time to defend as he looks to try to hold that inside line towards the hairpin. Ben Keys trying to go around the outside now. Matt York might try cutting back on this and using the power of that Bentley. Struge going to be able to hold on for now, but we've seen some overtakes happen in this final sector previously. Are we going to see another one? Ben Keys feeling the need to go defensive because of that Bentley, and we might see a move from Matt York on the exit. How much of a good exit is he able to get through here? And it looks like he's got good traction. Ben Keys going to have to come towards the inside line now as Matt York was trying to go around the outside. How do they fare through turn 1? Matt York sweeping around the outside. Can he hold on to that? Running out of track, but holding on to it as they head towards turn 2. Terminen now trying to get involved in this as well. He might be a bit too far back though, and he has to back out of it. Ben Keys trying to get a cut back onto Matt York, but I think Matt York has made that one work. And that was a brilliant move around the outside there. And now Ben Keys under pressure potentially from Terminen. Can he do anything about that Ferrari ahead? I'm not sure for the time being. He fakes a move towards the inside, but you've got to be almost beyond. Oh, that was a big jump there from Terminen through the chicane. Absolutely, the Lexus well known to be a car that you could really attack curves with, and Terminen definitely making use of that characteristic of the Lexus. But well, what an absolutely sort of brilliantly dramatic sequence of corners then. It's just what we saw in Tier 1 yesterday. We would have calm, everything would be rather peaceful and static, and then all of a sudden this chain reaction of events, because as soon as an opportunity presents itself, the opportunities are so difficult to come by, and everybody really sort of leaps on top of them and tries to maximize the opportunity at that point in time. And as Struge went from trying to capitalize on that mistake from Gosselin to trying to keep himself out of the wall. Look, Let's have a quick look at Astrucci's car. Can we see any damage there? It would be the left-hand side of the car we would be looking at, which is brilliantly not a side that we're going to see. Hopefully we might get a good angle of it through turn 2. It's looking pretty shiny, so I'm hoping that for Astrucci's sake that he might have kept that one out of the wall, that was a very, very scary moment for him, so he'll be relieved that he managed to hold on to that car. Zorak's still under pressure, and he's gone from putting pressure onto Oliars to being the one put under pressure from Connor Wright again, so definitely a dynamic going on between these guys. Just having a quick look at the chat. Any tips on FOV? And FOV is a tricky thing to set up. Yeah, it's a combination of your distance from the screen, what sort of screen size you have. I think resolution sort of factors a little bit into it, but as Andrex rightly says, there are some good guides out there to help kind of calculate and calibrate how you should set up your FOV. Sometimes it comes a little bit down to personal taste rather than what the equations say, but I think the likes of sort of Coach Dave Academy might have some good guides on that, as well as possibly, I'm not sure whether or not the Driver 61 group sponsoring AOR, of course, they might have some guides as well, so maybe check them out and see if they've got anything that can help you with that. But it does come down a little bit to personal taste sometimes. And Matt York, yeah, apparently a half spin on the chicane. It's so tricky through that sequence of corners, and Terminen has, I believe, managed to make up a position on Matt York, because Matt York, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was locked onto the gearbox of Ben Keys at one point. So yeah, so he has dropped some time again. So actually discussing a mistake that he made slightly earlier, but it's definitely affecting him on multiple occasions. Dylan Gosling, does he think about a move into the chicane? No, he backs out of that one. Do want to keep an eye on the battle further up, though, as well. Yonkers continuing to be under pressure from Razir. Grekas hasn't been able to make too much of an escape, though, so that will be a relief for Razir, thinking about the championship fight. Oh, we've got Meerveld and Gosling still battling on. Meerveld thought about having to go a little bit defensive there on the entry towards the hairpin, but was able to hold onto that position for the time being. Oh, as Meerveld, quite laggily, makes his way into the pits. So he is taking his pit stop even before the half an hour mark. So he's going to be looking to serve that penalty early and hopefully come out in some clean air. Doesn't want to be losing time and battling to Gosling. Gosling may be quite relieved by that. He'll be able to see what he can do in clean air. So that's going to be an interesting battle to keep an eye on. I think in the meantime, Marlon has been making some progress in closing up towards these guys, helped out a bit by some of their battling. So he is looking to try to bring himself back into the race and maybe towards the top 10. Ben Keys trying to put a bit of pressure onto the likes of Astruc. I think is our closest battle on track for the time being as they head towards the chicane. Again, how does Astruc fare? There's a pretty even run there from the pair of them, and you sometimes do have that with these guys. And just an update on Matt York again. So apparently he had a bit of contact. Not sure who that was with. That would explain why he ended up dropping back from and losing a position to Terminen. So not the way that Matt York would be wanting his race to go so far. We know that he's got good race pace at times in that Bentley, and the Bentley is really strong around here. And speaking of Bentleys being strong, Lennon McCoffkin continuing to put on a very, very good performance in his opening stint. He's got a gap of the timing board settle a little bit. Oh, actually has quite an oversteer moment on the exit of turn 4 there. So McCoffkin's still definitely pushing, but he has a gap of about 8 seconds over these guys. Now, obviously, in comparison to a 45-second penalty, that's not going to make a great deal of a dent. But, you know, he's still got maybe about a quarter of an hour until he looks to make his pit stop, and then he has all this time again. So he may effectively, during the course of the race, if he's able to hang about in clean air for the majority of the time, may only lose around 20 seconds to some of these guys and might be able to recover a top 10 finish, which with the 45-second penalty would be a good recovery from him, as Marlon and Climbs looking to continue that battle towards the chicane. Climbs could be in a little bit of trouble here because we know that the Ferrari is good on the straights. Once it gets going, it can be a very, very quick car down some of these straights, and huge moment there for Climbs as he gets a bit squirrely on the exit of the middle part of that complex and loses the back end. So that will release Marlon. That's made his life a lot easier, and he will set off after Matt York now. But Climbs just not quite able to hold onto the car there and dropping time as a result. See the likes of Gosling driving in a bit of no man's land still. What are his lap times for the time being though? 28.4, so that's a good amount of pace from Gosling. That is faster. That's faster than everybody ahead of him, including Makovkin, who clearly had a very poor lap last time round, so not what he wanted to be doing. Did a 28.6 on that last lap, whereas Korekes 28.0, Marco 28.1, Tommy 28.2, so... But yeah, Dylan Gosling, 28.4 on that last lap, so strong pace from him, which he'll be pleased about. And Conor Wright has lost a little bit of touch with Zorak, so he'll be trying to reel him back in again, so maybe just getting a bit too close, making a mistake, and then having to drop back and just sort of reassess the situation that he finds himself in. We've got Matt York coming into the pits as well, Shooter 80 serving his pit stop, and Meerveld has actually retired from this race. So he did the opening part of this race and then came in and seemingly never left the pits. So that's a shame for his race to end so soon. Obviously having that 30-second penalty would have made it difficult to get a strong result from here, but obviously not wanting to continue this race any further. It can be a very disheartening thing sometimes, and one advantage of sim racing is that if it does get a little bit too much and too frustrating, that you can just turn the game off. You don't have to spend the rest of the time maybe driving what feels like a pointless race. So Meerveld looking to take that option. Shooter also not having left the pits, and I've got a feeling he might be retiring as well, because Matt York pitted and has already come out of the pits, and I think Benjamin King, so I think the timing board may be sorting itself out a bit, because that is Ben Keys just ahead of him, and then Astruch just ahead of him there as well. So I think some of these guys, Matt York, and Terman having a moment through there as well. So a few of these guys making pit stops. I think Marlon must have made a pit stop amongst all of that as well. So some very early pit stops from these guys, and we saw that in the race yesterday that in terms of the drop-off with the tyres, there wasn't really too much that factored in, not until much later on in the race. So that's an interesting approach for some of these guys, and I'm not sure if it'll be one that necessarily pays off, but one thing that is going to be very interesting to keep an eye on is Tommy Rozier, the first one of our top 5 to come into the pits, and this could be crucial because he wasn't that far away from Marco Jonkers, and he would have really wanted... is that a slow pit stop there from Rozier? It's difficult to tell. We sometimes don't get the full series of animations on the broadcasting side of things, but we'll have to keep an eye on that as the likes of Jonkers and Korekes do their pit stops. But Rozier will be hoping... He'll be hoping that the undercut is fairly strong. It didn't seem to provide too much of an advantage. Yesterday, we saw the likes of the overcut working out quite well for some of these guys. To see where does Rozier emerge. He'll be hoping to come out in some clean air, just also keeping an eye on the battle with Tamanen and Marlon. Marlon not able to do anything just yet, but does look like he might be on the move. And where is Rozier? Rozier just coming down towards turn 1 now. So that is rather confusing. So is Matt York? So Matt York, I think, has emerged. I've just realised. I think Matt York has emerged around the cars that he was previously battling with, but he's actually a lap down, which is why I think he's being shown the blue flag. Because yeah, looking at the timing board now, I didn't quite realise that before, but Marlon sits in P11, Terman in P10, and then we've got Keys P9 and Struch P8. So he's lost basically a lap from that pit stop. And looking at the likes of where Razier has come out, Razier obviously further up the road than the likes of Matt York was, but relative to the leaders, so Tommy Razier coming into the final chicane now, and yeah, it is about, it's almost a lap. I'd say, looking at the track map, because that's Makovkin that we'll see. See actually diving into the pits now by the looks of it. Oh no, that was the mini map being a bit deceiving there. But you can see that there's about a corner and a half or so difference between Makovkin and Razier, and obviously Makovkin was about maybe 10 or so seconds ahead of Razier before Razier pitted, but it was not quite a lap. So I don't know, maybe Matt York had a bit of a slow pit stop, because I'm surprised that he came out basically exactly where he was battling before. It completely caught me off guard, and I didn't see anyone else come into the pits, but I assumed that they must have. So it's going to be an interesting one to see when the other guys do their pit stops. Has Matt York particularly lost or gained anything? Thinking of Tommy Razier, though, he'll be pleased that he has come out in some beautiful clean air. So he is going to be able to make a good bit of ground up. And Inspector Andrex has saved us on information again. Apparently Matt York had a 50-second stop for damage, so that would definitely look to explain it. We didn't see that contact that happened earlier on for Matt York in the race, but that would certainly be an explanation to answer that side of things. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You've got Andrex to thank as our I mentioned that Matt York, or Yorkie as I believe he goes by on YouTube, is probably streaming this race at the moment, hence Andrex doing some good inspection work. But yeah, dropping from P8 to P12 and then having that lengthy pit stop, so definitely not the race that he would have been hoping for so far. But yeah, this actually gets a little bit awkward for the likes of Marlon, because obviously Matt York doesn't want to lose any more time than he already has, but he's looking at the last laps. So Marlon was on 28.1, Ben Keys was on 29.2, so there was a second difference there, and Matt York was on 28.4, so he's kind of sandwiched, not just between the cars, but also sandwiched in pace between these two guys. So he's got to be careful not to hold up Marlon and compromise his race. And it can be really tricky with these blue flag situations. We'll have to see how he tries to tackle that one, but for the time being, as that might have been a moment potentially for Zorax through the chicane, I would like to skip back on the replay, but I'm concerned that we might see something from Connor Wright in a moment, and I don't want to miss another overtake. I think Zorax actually had quite a reasonable gap to Connor Wright, and then all of a sudden you can see visibly how much it has closed down. So we'll have to see what the lap times are when they cross the line. That would give us a bit of an inkling if Connor has just been chipping away at some of these laps that have gone by, or if Zorax did in fact make a mistake. So we'll see. Oliar's not too far away in distance, but Zorax last lap, 28.8 from him and 28.7 from Connor Wright. So maybe he made a mistake on a previous lap, or Connor Wright has just found a little bit of pace, just bit by bit, over these last few laps to close up towards the back of that McLaren But a strong bit of racecraft so far from Connor Wright, trying to gain some positions himself. Marlon now coming into the pit. So where will he emerge? You'd have to expect, given that he was locked onto the gearbox of Matt York, and with the amount of damage that he had in that Bentley, you would have to assume that Marlon will gain the position here. Marlon's obviously had a bit of an eventful race himself, but he did keep it out of the wall crucially. So did Astruch with his scary moment over the crest. So Matt York likely to still drop down the order a bit after that lengthy pit stop. But our closest fight on track for the time being is still between these two guys. We have what looked like a little bit of a lag spike there from Connor's car, but hopefully nothing too awful there. And I thought one of them might dive into the pits, but it was just a slightly deceiving camera angle on that one. Now, interestingly enough, looking towards the front, last laps then for some of these guys. Leonard McCofkin, 28.2, almost 28.3. Karekes, 28.1. And Marco Jonkers, after being initially passed earlier on in this race by Karekes, a 28.0. So Jonkers has not given up on this P2 position. And what is Razir doing? Razir 28.6 on that last lap. So that's not what he wants to be looking to do by any means. He seriously needs to improve that pace if he wants a chance of snatching a position either back from, or well, gaining the position on Jonkers, and particularly if he wants to put some sort of challenge towards the likes of Karekes. We've got Alex coming into the pits as well. And where did Marlon emerge in the end? So he is just sitting in front of Oliars, I believe that is. So he's coming into the hairpin now. Whereas Matt York, you see, is a bit in the background there. Actually, quite a bit. That's not coming down towards the hairpin. It's coming down to that chicane complex. So yeah, that is a considerable amount of time then that Matt York has lost as a result of that lengthy pit stop. So Marlon gaining from that. Alex doing his pit stop for the time being. I don't believe he was in too much of a fight as Connor Wright has come into the pit. So another one to keep an eye on, see what his sort of pace is once he emerges, and see what sort of pace he has in that BMW in the second phase of the race. Choosing to basically do his pit stop around the middle point of the race. Like I say, it doesn't seem to have too much of an effect on the sort of race pace that we're seeing in the second phases for these guys, whether you're pitting at around sort of 35 minutes in to maybe all the way down to 50 minutes. The level of tyre degradation, the difference between tyres just not being particularly substantial. So, trying to see, have we got anything looking particularly interesting on track for the time being? It doesn't look like we've got too many close battles. Jonkers lost a 10th on that last lap. These guys still lapping considerably faster than those behind, but McCofkin has found some pace again. 28.1 on that last lap. So he is looking to try to extend that advantage, though, back down to 28.5. What's it going to be from the two McLarens as they head towards the line? 27 from Karekes and 28.0 for Jonkers. So now it swings the other way again. So McCofkin gains 4 tenths and then loses almost 6 tenths, I think, on the next lap. So yeah, Karekes, we saw in the race last night that there wasn't too many people that could hang around in the 27s in the latter stints of the race. We saw brilliant pace from Niels, but there wasn't too many drivers that could do that. So that's strong race pace from both him and Jonkers this far into the stint, and that's definitely a concern for likes of McCofkin. But something else to keep an eye on, though, Tommy Razir, 27.802, his fastest lap of the race on that last lap. So maybe starting to find a bit of pace in that McLaren, and depending on maybe what these next couple of laps are during the pit stop phases, we could see some interesting changes of position potentially. Let's hop on board with Connor Wright, because Connor was on the gearboxes. That's Makofkin pitting ahead, so we'll have to see where he emerges, obviously with that 45-second penalty as well. Where does Zorax emerge out of the pits relative to Connor Wright? So Zorax just coming to the pit line now. It's a tricky pit exit here. Be so careful through this section. Connor Wright, he's already through turn 1. Where are they going to emerge? There's the BMW, and Zorax is behind him, so Zorax has lost a big chunk of time there to the BMW. So either through pit stops or I don't know if what was the last lap there from Zorax. Of course, it's a bit deceiving because of that pit entry, but losing time to the BMW, so maybe missed his mark on the pit box or had some damage potentially to repair. I don't remember seeing Zorax finding himself involved in any instance, but it does look like he has suffered during that phase of the race. But we have Makofkin that has come in, Korekis has come in, and Oliars has also come in as well. So, where does Korekis emerge relative to Tommy Rozier? Tommy Rozier, last lap, 28.0, coming into the final complex of the track now. When is Korekis going to go? Obviously a short run on that last pit box, so it's a quick run towards the pit exit. Korekis coming towards turn 2 now. Where is Rozier? Rozier's not there. Rozier, there he is. He is in the background. So Rozier, despite that earlier pit stop, again, the undercut just really not being that powerful and not able to particularly gain anything by doing it, as Makofkin, a very, very long wait for him, and we'll have to see where he comes out. And we've also got Yonkers that's come into the pits as well. So where does he emerge? But for Makofkin, where is it going to be? As he goes well beyond the pit exit line there. Now I'm not sure if there's any stewarding rules around that. I don't believe the game. I think that I was under the impression that the game would sometimes penalise it. I believed, but he'll be hoping that maybe no one else other than me noticed that from Makofkin. It's because it gains you quite a bit of time taking a line like that. So, but for relative position, though, Makofkin all the way down in P12 for the time being, and behind the likes of Zorax. So that is around the battle for, I think, P6. If I remember rightly, I think Connor Wright is in effective P6 with Oliars in 5th. Rozier in 4th, and we'll find out where Yonkers emerges amongst all of this. Where is Korekis? I think, he's going to sweep around the outside, and I think Yonkers is going to slot in behind him, and he will. And Rozier, where is Rozier? Rozier had a terrible lap, a 1:31 from him, so he's made an awful mistake, and that has really taken him completely out of touch from that battle for what is now the effective lead. So that potentially looks like it's going to be his chances over for challenging Yonkers and Korekis, unless there is any late drama. But now it potentially comes down to these two guys at the front. How much pace does Yonkers have? How much do these guys risk in this latter stage of the race to try to challenge for that win? Korekis is in a strong position at the moment, not just in this race but in the championship as well. This would very much help his title bid. Unfortunately, with the amount of tabs that I have on my screen, I can't easily clarify the championship point scoring system, but there's the difference between 1st and 3rd. It's not massive, but there was a 16-point gap between these guys, and I think it's probably going to be sort of maybe somewhere around the 10-point kind of margin if I was to hazard a guess. So, you know, that very much means that we could be seeing a case of whoever finishes in front of the other as we go into the finale could be the one that takes the championship. As Ben Keys continuing to be under pressure from an undoubtedly slightly frustrated Matt York, but losing a bit of time there actually through that series of corners. Now, one thing I do want to look at is the lap times and distance that Makovkin has to make up. So 27.8 on that last lap there from Makovkin. What was the likes of the front runner? So a 28.2 for Korekes. And that looks like that was the next fastest lap of anybody. Strong lap from Connor Wright actually as well. So good pace from them. But Makovkin definitely the one that has the best pace of anybody in this field. And he's got a bit of distance, quite a bit of distance actually, to the likes of Zorax. Oh, is that Alex in the background? I think that's a huge amount of damage. It is. So that BMW has had quite the makeover on the front end of that car, and oh, that's a bad sign. That's a very bad sign. When you see blinking lights in ACC, that usually means that the damage is seriously catastrophic. So Alex may be falling victim to the chicane. We've seen it happen so easily to so many drivers in Tier 2 and Tier 1. Soldering on though in the BMW. I would have thought he would have come in to repair that damage, but looks like he's staying out for the time being. Where does Dylan Gosling emerge? Dylan Gosling is in front of Connor Wright and is actually not too far away from Oliars. And I'm trying to recall back to whereabouts these guys were before too many of the pit stops occurred. I don't remember Gosling being in front of these guys. I thought that we had Zorax followed by Connor Wright and that those two were trailing Oliar. So if that is what indeed has happened, that's been a brilliant overcut for Dylan Gosling, exercising some good pace in the tail end of that first stint for him in the Bentley. And now with fresher tyres and a lot of the people in front of the only people that are going to be on fresher tyres are going to be Benjamin King, who still hasn't pitted, and Ben Keys, who is still running around in front trying to escape the Bentley of Matt York behind him. As, oh, that may be a mistake there from Gosling, coming under pressure now from Connor Wright. Tyres maybe not up to pressure or temperature just yet. It does Connor Wright think about having a move down the inside towards the final chicane? No, he doesn't. Gosling looking to defend that, but he is going to compromise his exit there. Oh, gets a very awkward bump through that second apex. Can Connor Wright capitalise on that? I'm not sure if he can, and again, the slipstream even down this readable straight almost into the back of the Bentley. Got to be so careful to not miss your braking point. We've seen it happen multiple times. Thinks about diving towards the inside line. Didn't manage to get Dylan to open up steering a bit, and Gosling going wide now as these two head towards turn 4. Connor Wright trying to go down the inside, leaving each other room. Can he make it stick down the inside? Gosling trying to send it around the outside and hold. That'd be brilliant defense if he can. Gets a very wide on the gravel, loses momentum then, and he's going to have to eventually concede to Connor Wright. That was almost a brilliant defense there. Oh, it's a huge jump for Connor Wright. So Connor Wright definitely not hanging about for too long. He wants to try to dispatch that Bentley and see what pace he's got to carry forward in this race. But a valiant effort there from Gosling, and he certainly is not giving up on this position. You can see though how squirrely the Bentley is on some of these slow speed corners. It's a weird car to drive. We're discussing this at Spa as well. I believe it's the only car where its centre of mass is actually closer to the front than it is at the back. So it has a lot of rearwards aero bias in the way this is designed, hence this sort of huge rear wing on the Bentley, and a massive series of diffuser tunnels as well to really try to shift that aero balance back towards a reasonable point on this car. And it does make it tricky when you're in these slow speed corners. It's agile, but sometimes almost a little bit too agile for its own good. It has quite a loose and open diff, and that's what you can see making the car squirrely on all these exits, where in these slow speed corners it just doesn't tend to grip up as well as some of these other cars. So Gosling losing out there and having to concede the position to Connor Wright for the time being. Now, what else do we have happening on circuit? Benjamin King and Ben Key still running around out front. Matt York closing onto the back of Keys once more. He'll have him out the way at some point soon. But let's have a bit of a lap time update. Last lap, 27.5 from Marco Jonkers, by far his best lap of the race, and was almost half a second faster than Karekis, as well as being half a second faster than Makovkin. So how they fared this time? 27.8 for Jonkers and 28.0 for Karekis. So could we see another late charge from Jonkers? No strategy or weather to really kind of bring him into this one this time round. This is purely about race pace and consistency at this point. But Jonkers potentially something still to be said. We've got 35 minutes left on the clock and only a couple of seconds separates these guys. So Jonkers may be the man to watch for the time being. See, we've got a battle going on between Jan Climbs and a Struch. Struch there getting a reasonable exit in that final chicane, and Jan Climbs, imagine the frustration of being a Porsche driver around some of these circuits. Just, you know, we did see Jan Climbs make a phenomenal move around, I think it was Alex earlier, here into turn 2. So if he's able to find an opportunity again, he might be able to do something similar. And just, it's all about having patience around a circuit like this where there's not too many opportunities. Just having the patience, knowing where your car is fast, kind of studying the other driver. How do they react to when you maybe fake a move? How do they react when you get closer to them and put them under some more pressure? Or as Jan Climbs taking a huge amount of curve through the chicane, really attacking those curbs there. And I don't want to jinx any of these guys, but I have to say, a brilliant effort from them so far, because we have seen no drive-through penalties awarded during the race up until this point, whereas I think we had drive-throughs as early on as about half an hour in yesterday, maybe even less in Tier 1. So Tier 2 putting on a good showing of more consistent and clean racing, and we generally have had very little incidents once again. So a solid effort from the Tier 2 guys, and showing that maybe sometimes it's not always about being the absolute quickest on raw pace, but having a bit more of a screwed on head when it comes to trying to put one of these races together. How were these last couple of laps for these guys? Actually went slightly the way of a Struch there, 10th of a second advantage for him. Looking towards the front, Jonkers was faster again, but only by 300ths on that last lap. Karekis managing to get back into the 27. Oh, there's a mistake there from Climbs, just about manages to hold on to that. That could have been very disastrous for him. The Porsche, sometimes such a difficult car to recover, and the gravel can really drag you out. Terminer may be finding that out a little bit there in the background. He kicks up some dust, but the Lexus not quite so easily pulled around by the gravel, I don't think. But the Porsche can be one that can snap on you so quickly. So good recovery there from him. Ben Keys still driving around out the front here, doing 28.8. Now, who was he battling with earlier on? I think he was around the likes of, obviously he had Matt York around him, but I think also the likes of a Struch, Climbs, Terminen. I think that is the sort of area that he was in. Now, on those last few laps, we've seen 29 from Terminen, high 28s from Climbs and a Struch. So that's a pretty even gap there, but you know, maybe with that level of tyre difference, you know, where we're talking maybe kind of around 20 minutes potentially, that could swing towards Ben Keys' favour in the latter portion of the race, because then he will have a very light car going into the closing stages of this race. Keep an eye on other drivers as well. 27.6 from Karekis. Oh, as he's being held up a little bit there, I think that might be, is that Benjamin King? It is. Oh, and this is actually technically for track position, so King doesn't have to give the position away. Is he going to back out the throttle? You'd have to assume that you would, and he does. So, was a battle there for position. I don't think that would have held up Karekis too much, but a slightly scary moment there, potentially for Karekis, as he tries to extend, losing a couple of tenths there to Karekis, to Jonkers on that last lap, but not too much harm done for him. but someone who is lapping very, very quickly, almost set his personal best of the race on the last lap of a 27.4. What lap time does Mukofkin do again? Because he is lapping seriously quick in comparison to guys ahead. It was 2 seconds faster than Zorak's last lap round, and it's a 28.1 from him. And Zorak's, has there been a change of position with him and Dylan Gosling? Zorak's 29.7, Dylan Gosling 29.1, and ahead of them, Connor Wright on 28.3. So those two may have swapped around at some point over the course of the last lap. So Zorak's maybe not. Oh, that's another mistake there from Gosling. I think it's Gosling just trying to be really quite cautious of that second apex, not getting any track warnings, but in doing so, he leaves himself vulnerable. Oh, to making a huge bit of oversteer there, and that's going to give Zorak's an opportunity as they try to go side by side now through turn 8, door to door, as they go through their brilliant side by side stuff through there, heading through the King now towards the hairpin. Can the McLaren get it under brakes? It's pretty even on the entry. Gosling turning in a little bit early. It's going to be pretty much a drag race again with these two still firmly alongside each other, but I think Zorak's will get the position. Does Gosling think about slipstream? He does. He's going to head towards the outside. Zorak's having to defend that one. That might compromise his exit down the start-finish straight, and we might see a move back from Gosling here if he can get into the slipstream of that McLaren. No, it's just not strong enough. Even with a late apex, it's just not quite strong enough for him to be able to make up that sort of ground. So Gosling making a mistake there. So he might have gained the position, but not too long after, it ends up falling away from him with a mistake in that tricky section. We saw Jan Climbs losing it through there. And again, that's two cars now where, you know, we said the Bentley quite loose in the rear. And like I say, sometimes too loose. And look at that bright pink Bentley, someone that's absolutely mastering the Bentley's performance at the moment. Then Mukofkin in the background there, trying to close in on these guys. So Mukofkin is within a top 10 position at the moment. With just under half an hour on the clock, you would have to assume that he's going to close up to these guys probably within the next 3 to 4 laps, which leaves him plenty of time to try to make some moves. And with the sort of pace advantage we've seen, you'd have to assume that he would be able to set something up. As looking back towards the front, we've got Yonkers trying to get past Benjamin King. Benjamin King not making it very easy. He is actually defending that inside line, so King, he's within his right to do that, and I think he compromised Karekas a little bit, but did look like he put up a little bit more of a fight and resistance to Yonkers there, as Ben Keys and Benjamin King continue to stay out. As Ben Keys has done his pit stop as we get the world's worst camera angle as he comes out of the pit lane, and he's going to slot just in front of Gosling. So Ben Keys, I think, has actually gained a huge amount of ground relative to some of these guys, because he was fighting amongst the likes of a Struch. As Gosling trying to go around the outside, we saw him kind of trying to make this move before, and the same sort of mistake again, running wide on the exit, and it loses him momentum, and Mukofkin is hunting these guys down in the background, and he is closing in. I think Gosling may have made a mistake on that last lap. Oh, and Keys making a similar mistake there to Marlon again, and does that give a potential opportunity for Dylan Gosling trying to think about going down the inside? He is going to go down the inside. Does Keys give him room? Trying to go side by side through here. Oh, just about making that all work. Mukofkin goes sweep around the outside there, and he gets the position on the Bentley now. Does he carry that momentum towards the Ferrari? Got a little bit caught up on the apex there through turn 8. Not sure if he'll be able to do anything there, but I don't think it's going to be long until Mukofkin makes a move on Ben Keys, and up the road is Zorak's ahead of him. So Mukofkin making moves, and there's Benjamin King to pit as well amongst all of this. Mukofkin closing in on the braking zone. What sort of exit does he get here? He carried good speed out of that final corner. Don't know if it's going to be enough to challenge towards turn 1. It's going to be a bit too far back for now, but we've seen the confidence that he carries through some of these corners. Oh, as he gets a kick of oversteer. Makovkin really pushing on. And thinks about a move towards the inside there. Ben Keys takes a very wide line. As Makovkin getting all over the curb, they're really, really pushing. It's getting on board from this. I think we might see quite a few corrections as he's balancing this car on the throttle beautifully. Quick hands there, trying to keep the momentum in his Bentley. Now, does he think about a move towards the inside? He is going to look towards it. That could be close, heading towards the chicane. Does Makovkin make it through? Side by side, brilliant racecraft there from the pair of them to leave each other space. And Makovkin still firmly onto the back of this car of Ben Keys. Now looking towards the inside. Is Ben Keys going to lose a position here? Ben Keys, he's held around the outside once and he'll do it once more. But Makovkin trying to set up a move there, makes a little bit of contact. Gosling still trying to make something happen out of this and recover some positions himself, but not able to do anything just yet. Makovkin now looking towards the outside. How late does he dare to brake? Oh, contact on the entry there, and Ben Keys is around. Does he hold on to it? He doesn't. Gosling has to go wide as well, and that was very unfortunate there between those two. We're going to have a replay between these two guys. See what happened there. I think, by the looks of it, we'll go... maybe let's go on board with Makovkin. Because I think that as they came towards the hairpin, it just looked a little bit like Makovkin was squeezed a bit under the braking. Yeah, in the braking. A little bit of a sort of early days Verstappen move there from the Ferrari. Not the most severe, but just a little bit of movement there in the braking zone. And unfortunate contact between those two drivers. Such a shame, because we saw such good side-by-side action between those two guys. But I think Keys just maybe got a little bit ambitious there on the entry towards the braking zone, trying to hold on to that position. And Makovkin did obviously muscle his way through a little bit, but I'd say a little bit of a racing incident there, and if anything, responsibility on the Ferrari of Ben Keys. So such a shame on that front. Just to give another update though, Benjamin King still soldering on ahead. I'm not exactly sure when he's planning on doing his pit stop. I'm sure that he's aware that you do actually have to do a pit stop during the course of this race, but he is still out at the pointy end of the grid in third place, doing a 29.2 on that last lap, and Tommy Rozier 29.0. So Tommy having quite a poor day for consistency, just has not been able to put the sort of pace together. And well, heading towards Silverstone, this is definitely going to make it a deciding race there with Korekis. Don't think he'll take the championship lead after this one, but he'll certainly be only just a small amount of points away from Rozier, and it's going to give us a very exciting finale indeed, as we see Rozier taking a huge amount of code. A little bit of dust kicked up ahead. That is from Benjamin King. Now, that's going to mean that Rozier is going to be onto the back of him fairly soon, I'd imagine. Probably not too long at all. How much of a fight does King put up here? We saw him back out the throttle when it came to Korekis. He was a bit firmer when it came to Yonkers. What's it going to be like for Rozier, and how aggressive does Rozier get? Thinks about saying something on the inside, but can't do anything just yet. Rozier right onto the gearbox now of that McLaren. These two cars equal on power. Rozier looking towards the inside line as they head towards that chicane, and King finally comes into the pits and will allow Rozier to have that position. So King finally making his pit stop with just over 20 minutes left to go. So a heroically long first stint from him, and we saw the amount of positions that Ben Keys, before that incident between himself and Makovkin, how much time he seemed to gain on the track. So it'd be interesting to see where the likes of King will emerge. Let's have a look at where Makovkin is relative to Zorax, because I think he'll be closing in fairly soon. Gained 7/10 on that last lap, and there's 20 minutes of this race left to go, so you'd have to imagine that P6 could be on the cards here for Makovkin if he can keep his head down and close up to that McLaren. We've seen Zorax make a few mistakes, whereas generally speaking Makovkin has looked very comfortable in that car. Where is Benjamin King? Benjamin King just emerging out of the pits now, and he is behind Terminen. So I think he might have gained a little bit through that, maybe just through not having any battles. I don't think his position has particularly changed, but it does look like that strategy has paid off somewhat well for him and could put him in a very strong position to maybe catch up to the likes of Terminen just ahead, as Struch may be making mistakes through that chicane, having to defend very early on to Jan Climbs. Jan Climbs, can he make a move around the outside going into this complex? It's going to be very difficult to go through there side by side. Jan Climbs having to skip that second apex as he gets a bump on the entry. That brings Terminen into it. Jan Climbs getting some wheel spin as he comes through that corner, now trying to go towards the outside, but we've got Terminen trying to come down the inside now of Climbs, so Climbs goes from being the hunter to the hunted. Terminen putting him under pressure. Climbs using some of the runoff and more there to try to out-drag that Lexus, and this is helping out Benjamin King immensely if these guys continue to fight, but Climbs trying to make a move and capitalise on a Struch's mistake there, but not able to do anything just yet. Did run wide at the hairpin. I'm not entirely sure you could argue he gained an advantage as such, because I think time-wise wouldn't have been any faster than taking it normally, but one way or another he did hold on to that position ahead of the Lexus, who runs a little bit wide through turn 2. Oh, it goes wider. Is it Struch? And Struch is off. He just about keeps it on the track, on the grass enough to not lose too much time. And we saw that mistake actually from Climbs earlier, but Struch making it worse. So after holding on to that position initially, he then drops 2, and then now he's got the McLaren of Benjamin King just behind him and on those really fresh tyres. And the momentum may be going the way of King at the moment with those mistakes, those consecutive mistakes from a Struch. That could certainly make life interesting for these positions just outside the top 10. Is also looking a bit further down. We've got Matt York, who's trying to recover some positions and overtake Jarzabowski in that Ferrari. Ferrari, as we've seen, not the easiest car to drive around here. And Matt York, after a difficult early stage, very twitchy there through some of those corners, just not able to commit to having the power down at certain points in time, as Alex has come into the pit. So I think he's been driving around with that damage for an awfully long time. I just want to see the front of his car. No, he did repair it, so this is another pit stop. So whether or not Alex now retires from the race, I'm not 100% sure. So we'll have to see what he ends up doing, as we've got Marlon and Ben Keys going side by side, and that's on the exit turn 4, I think, as they run towards the chicane, and Ben Keys is going to lose another position. So battle going on between those two. Marlon, oh, does he hold on to it? Ben Keys got a good run through the chicane. Does he think about launching a challenge towards this complex ahead? Such a tricky zone to go side by side through, but no, not going to be able to make that one up. So Marlon recovering another place as he will look to try to hunt Dylan Gosling down ahead of him. Marlon 28.7 on the last lap, so faster than the guys ahead, but with just over 15 minutes to go, maybe not enough to close down the gaps. Let's have a look and see what some of these other times are. Oh, I've just noticed Korekis has lost the lead. Korekis has lost the lead, so I'll try and go back on the replay. So he lost it quite a while ago. In actual fact, is there damage on the front of that car? That looks like the front end of a car that's maybe not had the greatest of times. And Korekis, after having such a strong showing so far, something has happened to him, and Yonkers has taken full advantage of that. And this could be very, very telling, because depending on how much damage Korekis has, is that going to allow Razier to close up? I mean, on that last lap, it was a 28.3 from Korekis. It was only a tenth slower than Yonkers, so that must have happened a bit earlier on, but a mistake from Korekis somewhere over the last couple of laps. And he was half a second faster than Razier, so regardless of whatever has occurred there for Korekis, it does look like he's still got good pace in the car. What is it like this time around? 28.2 for Yonkers and a 28.3 for Korekis. So, yeah, still very much on the pace with Yonkers and Razir as he comes towards the line. What's it going to be for him? It's a 28.7, so those two at the front still extending their gaps, and if anything, Razir is being hunted down slightly by Olyars and Connor Wright, who have put in some strong laps, but Karekes, after making his way into the lead and really being in a strong position, not just to take the win, but to take the fight to Tommy, that's just made his life a little bit more difficult. He'll still gain, if it stays like this, still gain a bit of points for that finale and leave himself definitely very much in the running to try to take the championship away from Tommy. But again, that just makes it a bit more difficult. And, you know, these guys in recent races have been kind of the class of the field. And Silverstone, a circuit that's incredibly strong for McLaren, so you'd have to assume that these guys will be the ones at the pointy end of the grid again, and that's just, you know, that could be very, very costly for Karekes and his attempts to take this championship, and maybe another one that slips through his fingers. Had some unlucky moments in the previous season in Tier 2. Generally, I think hasn't really had any unlucky moments. He's made mistakes himself at Donington Park and now here as well. And that is going to be potentially very costly for him. What is it for these two guys this time? 28.1 for Yonkers, 28.2 for Karekes. So Yonkers still extending that advantage a bit. Tommy Razir, as he makes his way towards the line, what's it going to be for him? 28.7, almost an 8. And Olyars, 28.4. So, you know, maybe, although Karekes has lost P1, Razir, with just under 15 minutes left to go, he could come under pressure from Olyars, because that's almost a 0.4 of a second advantage. Razir, I'm wondering, how cautious is he being through this chicane? Because if he's got warnings and he's concerned about getting a drive-through, he really does not want to throw away a third place position. Worst case scenario, he'll take a P4, but he really does not want to be dropping too many positions, and that's quite a cautious line through there. And whereas you compare that to Olyars, you can visibly see the amount of extra curb he's taking. Bit of a different camera angle there for Connor Wright, so not quite as comparable, but Razir definitely being cautious. And looking at the splits, you see Sector 1, Razir is actually on that last lap slightly faster than Olyars, but on the second sector he's 0.2 down. On the third sector he loses another 0.2. So yeah, it's definitely just the commitment, I think, from Razir, not just through that sausage curb chicane, but in that really fiddly complex of turn 7. It makes it so difficult to commit if you're juggling with warnings and not wanting to get a drive through. So I think that's what's going on here. I think Razir, I have to see what the lap time is this time round. 28.7, and Olyars, 28.8 from Olyars that time round. So in actual fact, swinging a little bit the other way, as did the battle at the front. Yonkers at 28.8, almost a 9, and Karekes at 28.5. So a lot going on, including Makovkin finally having hunted down the McLaren. It was a high 28 from Zorak's last lap round, and a mid 28 from Makovkin, and definitely in the hot seat for trying to make up a position. Let's go on board with him again and see how much he's fighting with this car. I mean, he's been driving brilliantly all race. Absolutely, I think would have been the class of the field if it hadn't been for that penalty from last time out. Oh, gets a kick of oversteer there. Actually, almost a full amount of opposite lock at one point, but still carries great momentum. How much does he attack this chicane in the Bentley? You can see that car slipping away, and it actually carries great bit of momentum there and going towards the next couple of... Oh, and there's contact! And there's contact with Zorak. Zorak's flipped across the front of the Bentley there. And we'll look at that from an outside perspective, but Zorak's, I think the momentum that Makovkin was carrying on the exit of that corner put him in a great position to make a move, but now, did Zorak move across? Did he move across too late? We saw Makovkin have that instant. See, Zorak goes wide on the entry. Makovkin looks towards the outside. Zorak. It was that was a late move from Zorak. The amount of momentum that Makovkin was carrying there, he was going for that space, and it was just a little bit late there. I think again. I know that Makovkin had incidents to answer for, as who just retired to the pits there. 177 No, was that somebody else? We've got Shooter 80 in the pits. Number 36 maybe? Jarzabowski, I think, may have just retired from the race. But yep, looking at that incident between Makovkin and Zorax, I think a little bit like what we saw earlier with Ben Keys and Makovkin. I think to be fair to Makovkin on both occasions, I think he was actually a bit squeezed in those scenarios and didn't really have anywhere to go. And that was a lot of damage. You can see visibly the front of that McLaren crumpled Zorax ahead. And is that going to leave him vulnerable to the likes of Goslin and Marlon? He'll be hoping that these guys battle quite heavily over the course of these next few laps. As on the last lap, Korekes lost quite a bit of time. He lost about 7/10 of a second on one lap, and then did a 29 on the last. What was it from Tommy? Tommy's on a 29 as well. What's Olyar's doing? 28.5 from Olyar, so he's got strong pace. So again, 10 minutes left on the clock. Whether or not he can do anything about trying to snatch away that podium position from Razir, we'll have to see, but some of these guys suffering at this point in the race. And Goslin has been able to maintain the advantage over Marlon for the time being. We've got a brief yellow flag there, I think, for a second. I didn't see who that was for. Goslin takes a little bit of a wonky line there on the entry to turn 1. Or is that Marlon having a little bit of lag behind him? Marlon tends to have a slightly poor connection, but generally a stable one. Yeah, you can see the movement. It's just not quite tracking right. Just taking a sort of a slightly awkward amount of slip angle to what we would conventionally expect. But you can see that gap to Zorax has visibly closed down a lot, and Goslin might be able to put some pressure onto that McLaren in just a moment. Zorax will be praying for Marlon to battle with Goslin a bit. He thinks about a move down the inside, cuts back towards the outside. Definitely has to be a lot closer than that if you want to make a move work there. But in this sector, this is where the Bentley's really strong. Oh, Zorax goes off there. Maybe missing a bit of front end downforce. Covers the inside quite late. Going down towards the hairpin, then Goslin trying to go towards the outside. How does Marlon play this in the background? He's going to try to come back towards the inside. He might get a run on the Bentley, but I think the Bentley might out-drag him, and he does. So Marlon there actually stopped Goslin from trying to make that move on the McLaren. Goslin couldn't quite take the line he wanted to, and I think he thought about an inside move there, but couldn't make it happen. And now is he under pressure, potentially from the Ferrari, as we hop on board the rear wing of Goslin. Just not close enough. The straight line speed of that Bentley is very solid indeed, and Marlon just not able to quite make anything happen. Zorax, that you can see, visibly struggling, and I think he is missing some front-end grip dearly. Then he might actually give an opportunity to Goslin to go around the down the inside towards turn 4, and I think he'll make that move fairly easily. Oh, as Goslin gets a kick of oversteer, Zorax loses momentum on the exit, and that's going to let Marlon go past, I think, as Marlon then slots in front of the McLaren. Can't carry that momentum onto the Bentley, but the battle between these two will resume, and that battered and bruised McLaren of Zorax will drop down the order a bit. Ben Keys is a bit further back, so I'm not sure that he'll be able to do anything about Zorax in that wounded McLaren. But yeah, just the damage really getting the better. You can see it just is almost seems to be getting worse. I think maybe he's having to put more and more strain onto those front tyres, having to do an awful lot of heavy lifting, missing that aero, and that is going to be destroying them. But Marlon now locked onto the gearbox of Goslin. Goslin thinks about going defensive, decides he doesn't need to. Still, again, a little bit of compromised exit. How they fare through the chicane. That looks like some good momentum there from the Ferrari, but just doesn't have the drive. Just unable to make something happen. So we'll stay on board with Marlon through this sequence of corners here. Goslin takes a bit of extra curb, which you'd expect in the Bentley. You can get away with it, whereas the Ferrari having to be a lot more reserved. You can visibly see how the Bentley able to use so much more of the track, covered slightly awkwardly by the one of the stickers on the windscreen, unfortunately. Oh, as that was a kick of oversteer for Marlon. He just about holds on to that one, so you can see how hard he is pushing in the Ferrari, even with such a great downforce package on that car, still struggling for grip. How hard's he attack this chicane? Cautious approach from both drivers and taking no curb whatsoever there. Marlon on that second apex. He saw the level of catastrophe it gave him before and took him out of, I think, what was P5 at the time. So he won't be able to do anything for the time being. Let's have a look around our leaders. Korekka's gained a little bit back there, but he's 3 seconds behind Yonkers. So Yonkers, once he got into that lead position, has been able to do fairly well. Oliar's continuing to hunt down Razir, though. He's gained another half a second, and there's only about 1.5 seconds between them, and these guys are going to have about 4 laps left, I believe, of this race. So Oliar's could, on the final lap, could be right on the back of Razir, and that's exactly what Razir doesn't want. Just checking back towards Goslin and Marlon. Marlon again close to making a move, but I don't think he's going to be able to do anything just yet. Now Bentley, a wide car at the best of times, but it's even wider around a tight and twisty circuit, and a circuit that is particularly strong at as well. Marlon, can he do anything? It looks like he's fast in his opening series of corners, these long, fast, sweeping corners, and he looks, that was a brilliant run there, I think, for Marlon. Can he do anything about it in the slipstream now? Dylan Gosselin thinks about trying to defend. He is going to have to defend. How does Marlon treat this run through the chicane? Dylan gets a little bit of a wonky line on the exit, but not enough to give Marlon the ability to get the cutback. So again, Dylan Gosselin will hold on to this position. We saw Petrochenko in the Nissan valiantly trying to defend his position during, well, I mean, almost the entire race it felt like for him. I'm sure it did feel like the entire race for him in the cockpit. It always feels that much more stressful, but certainly for an extremely long time. And Goslin having to put up a that's Zorax and Ben Keys. Zorax then has been losing time, lost another second away from Keys. I think those two might have been battling already, and Ben Keys trying to go around the outside now into the final chicane. Don't think he'll be able to do anything there. Tries to get a cutback. Will he get a nice exit? It was alright, but it was safe, and safe sometimes isn't too good in the grand scheme of things. You have to imagine that McLaren be suffering a bit on straight line speed. Oh, is it suffering immensely on the entry towards turn 1? And does that give an opportunity to Ben Keys? We've seen him move around the outside before. Can Ben Keys repeat Jan Climbs' brilliant move from earlier on in the race? Not yet, but he might be able to get the drive and the cutback. Trying to use that extra grip he's got, almost touching on the exit. Oh, almost going door to door as they head towards turn 4, but eventually Keys will get a position as the McLaren has to concede. And Zorax, in that battered and bruised McLaren, will eventually have to give that one up. And potentially, he doesn't want to battle for too long because there's a couple more laps left to go. And he could find himself under pressure from Jan Climbs if he is not careful. But does hold onto what will now be that remaining top 10 spot for now. But brilliantly set up move there from Ben Keys. Used his car where it was quick, made use. Oh, as Marlon has a dive. Oh, Marlon completely missed his braking there and goes very, very, very wide. And you'd have to think that's going to allow Goslin to hold on to that position now. Has enough of an advantage to hold on to P8. Ben Keys quite a distance away, but Marlon getting way too greedy on the entry to the hairpin there. Will hop on board from his point of view. Dylan just maintained his line. There was nothing, no changes in the braking zone. Just think Marlon brakes, yeah, solid. I'd say kind of 5 to 10 meters later than the Bentley. And those are the consequences. So a unfortunate error from him, and not the first one this race either. Once we catch back up to live action, which we have now, let's have a look and see how things stand. 29.0 last lap for Korekka, so Korekka's now driving quite slowly. Yonkers pulling away. I think, let's see what these laps are as they come across the line. 28.4, that's a brilliant lap at this point in the race for Yonkers, and Korekka's 29.1, so 7 tenths lost to Yonkers. What does Razir do? Because you can see visibly in the background, there is Ollier's, and there's going to be 2 more laps left to go. What is the gap between these two guys? Rozier does a 28.8. Ollier's actually loses a 10th on that last lap, so Ollier's not able... Oh! Rozier makes a mistake! Rozier makes a mistake on the exit of turn 1, and that's going to lose him a few tenths. It wasn't too awful, but that definitely swings a little bit towards the favour. Oh, there's a yellow flag there for 38. Who's the 38 car? I can't find them. That's Zorax. Zorax is off. Matt Yorker's gone off as well. So I'm not sure what's gone on there. Zorax is parked on the apex. Matt Yorker's continued on ahead. Let's just try scrolling back. So Zorax was already well. Zorax, I think. Oh dear. I think Zorax has had a wheel disconnect or something there, because he's gone off the circuit entirely. And where did Matt York come into this? Matt York then comes into this chicane. I think he's just missed his braking, so he's a completely unrelated incident, and poor Struch just comes across the car, wandering across the circuit there. I think Zorax, who's still stationary from where we last saw, thankfully no longer on the racing line, and I think Zorax has had a complete wheel disconnect there, so an unusual incident there from for him, as we have started the final lap of this race now. Jonker's continuing to extend his lead. What is the gap between these two? You can see Ollier's is closer, 29.3 for Rozier, 28.8 for Ollier's. How hard does Ollier's push on this final lap? How hard can Rozier push on this final lap? We're suspecting that maybe he's on the limit a bit when it comes to these warnings. I think Zorax has disconnected now from the race, so his car is out of the way. But a very weird and unfortunate incident for him, and an unfortunate, so close to the end as well. He was battling on as is with the damage on that car, but unable to do anything further. Tommy Rozier safe line through there. Ollier's looks like he might have actually lost a bit of ground, if anything, so Rozier might have just about done enough to hold on to this position. Oh, Jonker's going a little bit deep. Want to make sure, keep it neat and tidy to the end, but it does look like Jonkers is going to take back-to-back wins here in AOR after a brilliant race at Spa where he won it on strategy. I said today if he did it, he'd have to do it on pure pace and consistency, and it's exactly what he's done. A fantastic result there from him, for Marco Jonkers to take the win ahead of Korekas, who eats into Tommy Rozier's championship lead, leaving us with a very interesting finale ahead. He'll be frustrated with where the mistake he made during the race to concede that sort of championship contention and potential race win. Rozier will just about hold on to P3 in the end. Ollier's couldn't quite hunt him down and will take P4. Strong but slightly lonely race from Connor Wright to take P5. And Makofkin, well, he was the absolute class of the field, I think, in terms of pace generally today. But unfortunately, with that 45-second penalty, P6, a very strong recovery drive from him, and he had to work hard for that one at times. Another Bentley, the next Bentley to come across the line. Dylan Goslin, best performance, I believe, this season of him by far. Marlon actually closed up a lot, all things considered, at the end there. Goslin made a big mistake on that last lap, lost 1.5 seconds, but Marlon, with the mistakes he made, not able to do anything about it. Ben Keys, difficult race for him. Climbs had a mixed race as well. Brilliant move, though, would have been a highlight for him during that race, as Terminen wasn't able to quite do anything about the Porsche at the end. A Struch crossing the line in P12, and I think the last of our active finishers. Matt York, a mixed race for him as well, with that lengthy pit stop, and he will cross the line in P13, and that will be the finishing order there. So a very, very busy race, as Korekas quoting in the championship that he, in his mind, that it is over. I would heavily suggest that is not the case. He has still gained points over Rozier, valuable points at that, and Rozier, I think, emulating my opinion and questioning that. But yeah, I think very much all still to play for in the final race, but a very, very exciting and battled race all the way throughout the field. There was battles, much like in Tier 1, we had battles at the front, we had battles in the mid-pack, and we had battles all the way down in the final positions as well. We'll see if any of these guys want to come in for an interview, so I'll just, unfortunately I shall have to quickly type that in now, so we'll see if any of them want to join us. So we will see if anybody takes us up on that offer. But in the end, in terms of the final standings of the race, Marco Jonkers takes back-to-back wins here, with a clearly disappointed Carreras finishing P2. Tommy Brazier still championship leader in P3. Oliar's strong performance from him, couldn't quite take the fight to Brazier in the end. He'll finish in P4. Connor Wright, P5. Good recovery drive and fastest lap of the race for Makovkin. A little bit of a commiseration prize for him. Dylan Goslin, great effort from him. By far his best result, finishing P7. Marlon, a difficult race for him, but still finishing P8. He'll be fairly happy with that, I think, all things considered. Ben Keys finishing P9. Jan Climbs finishing in P10 to round out our top 10 finishes, and then Termanen P11, Astruch in P12, Matt York in P13, and then our drivers DNFing from the race. Zorax almost finishing this race, and then a technical issue by the looks of it, taking him out of the fight at the very end there. So he'll still be classified though as P14. Benjamin King, a mixed race for him as well. Jaz Boski, we're not entirely sure what happened to him. He just seemed to retire from the race at some point. Alex had damage on his car. He ended up retiring. Meerveld started the race, but with that penalty decided not to finish. Shooter 80 backs out of the race as well at some point in the early stages, and Totev seemingly with a disconnect at the very beginning of the session, unfortunately for him. But that will be that. So I think we'll have to see what if we are able to get anybody in for interviews. Oh, I do believe we actually have Marco Jonkers in for interviews, so we'll bring him in. Marco, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me as well?
I can. Brilliant stuff. What a fantastic race for you there, and back-to-back wins as well. I was saying sort of during the beginnings of this race, you know, you had an absolute brilliant bit of strategy that we saw at Spa. That was an exceptional, kind of just a brilliant masterclass in those changeable conditions. But today, very stable conditions, and really just about consistency, trying to keep calm, I think, and watching out for those warnings. So yeah, huge congratulations on the win. But just tell us a bit about like sort of how you're feeling and what was it like from your point of view in that race.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Well, it seemed very consistent and easy, but it was quite difficult. I had to take it very easy on the track limits as well, because I got like 2 at the first 2 laps, so that didn't go that well. So I had a little bit of trouble finding a rhythm in the beginning when I was at the second place. Well, first of all, the Bentley I think was the fastest today, but yeah, he got like the penalty unfortunately. But yeah, that was a little bit luck on our side, but still I think I made like 2 mistakes. Then I lost the second place at the beginning, and afterwards I felt like I had to take a little bit more easy to not make sure I crash or get any other track warnings. And yeah, the first race of the first part of the race was relatively okay, but after the pit stop I had found some pace and then I closed the gap again, but yeah, at a certain point it was quite difficult to catch him because I got a little bit of pressure drops on my tires as well. So my tires started to drop a little bit more towards the end. Then when I couldn't close it anymore, I was like, okay, keep continuing and hopefully finish P2. But then in the end, he went off at the chicane, and then it was a little bit of a present, and afterwards I didn't make any mistake myself and was able to finish it. So
Yeah, we didn't quite catch where it was that Carreras lost the lead, but yeah, absolutely.
That was like the first chicane, so I guess he hit the curb like wrong and then went off. Like the McLaren isn't the easiest car over there, so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where it's probably the biggest difference with the McLaren that's been surprisingly strong over the last couple of days, both in Tier 1 and Tier 2 around the circuit. But yeah, versus things like the Bentley, it's just able to absorb those bumps so much more comfortably. And yeah, that's I think one of the biggest difference makers between those cars. But as you quite clearly showcased in that race, that whilst you may have been slightly gifted, arguably, that sort of P1 position from that mistake from Carreras, you kept your cool and you kept consistent, and ultimately that ended up being heavily rewarded with the victory. So very well deserved, even if it was a little bit of a present. That absolutely kind of full credit to yourself for managing to do that, because as we saw, there were several people. We saw Marlon in the Ferrari, which is another car that suffers quite badly with the bumps, that he ended up being a victim to that chicane, and we saw the likes of Malinowski last night in Tier 1 falling victim to it as well. So it's a tricky one to concentrate over and push for in a 90-minute race. So a fantastic effort there from you. And also, another bit of congratulations, you're also the first back-to-back winner that we've had all season. So another sort of thing to add to your name. And with that result, and with sort of the finishing positions of everyone around you, I think you would have bumped your way up the order by a couple of positions as well, heading into Silverstone, which known to be another strong track for the McLaren. So how are you feeling for that? Do you think you might be able to make it through on the trot?
Well, Silverstone isn't my best track, even though it's probably the best for the McLaren. So yeah, like you have some other fast McLaren drivers as well. So I still need to do some practice for that, but I'm definitely going to try, and then we see how it goes next week. So
yeah, absolutely. It's I think if we've seen anything and kind of gained anything from the last couple of races, is that even if maybe in the early stages of a race or qualifying, that we certainly can't count you out of being out of the hunt for P1 in the end. So brilliant stuff once again. Congratulations both for this week and last week as well. Unfortunately, I don't think we got to speak to you at the after the race at Spa. So congratulations for a pair of extremely good results on your side of things, and best of luck at Silverstone for what will be the final race of the year.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Of the year, excuse me, of the season. You're already in much. And thank you for joining us, Marco, in the interview box. It's much appreciated.
Bye.
Cheers, Marco. Brilliant stuff there, and like I say, once again, good to have some drivers joining in the comms box for an interview. We don't get too many of those, but got a couple of interviews with our winners of Tier 1 and Tier 2 2 days in a row. So that's a pretty good, strong showing on that front. Haven't seemingly got anyone else queued up for interviews, it seems, unfortunately, but we will just give it a couple more minutes. But yes, absolutely, in terms of the action for this week, then that is it for AOR on the Sprint Series. We'll be back on Monday at 7:30 for Tier 1, where we will have the championship decider between what looks like to be George Boothby versus Jardier, and Niels with an outside chance as well. So that will be on Monday next week, and then we will have another exciting decider as well between Grantis Carreras and Tommy Rozier for Tier 2. So we've got action on both streams where it's going to go down to the wire. And Silverstone, a circuit that has definitely provided great amounts of action and excitement over the years across multiple disciplines, and I have no doubts whatsoever that that both of those tiers next week will produce action once again. And also, just as a small side note, to give a bit of a shout out to the entire Tier 2 grid, not a single driver got a drive-through for corner cutting this evening. So that a little bit more of a cautious approach maybe from the guys in Tier 2 that does mean that they don't end up on quite the same extreme alien level of pace that we see in Tier 1. In the long run, it still, I think, probably ended up with them finishing net higher up in sort of race time overall. So a good, strong showing there from all of the drivers in Tier 2. But it looks like that will be it for this evening. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Unfortunately, couldn't have Tim join me tonight in the end. Hopefully, he will be back up and running next week for the action at Silverstone. But until then, it's goodbye.